Well, with 15 days until Election Day and more than 14 million early votes already submitted, Donald Trump decided yesterday was the perfect day to highlight the peculiar biographical fact that he has never worked a day in his life. Donald McDonald made a special appearance at a completely rigged photo op version of a McDonald's drive-thru in which the customers were actually just posing as customers, having been pre-selected and pre-screened by the Secret Service to take their positions in the drive-thru line of a McDonald's that was actually completely closed down. Just so Donald Trump could pretend, for once in his life, for a few minutes, pretend to work for a living, the way Kamala Harris once did when she was working her way through school at McDonald's, just like her husband, Doug Emhoff, worked his way through school at McDonald's.
At any point in your life, have you served 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun, working at a McDonald's? Yes or no? That's it.
I have.
The McDonald's that Donald McDonald closed down yesterday so that he could pretend to work is in Pennsylvania, of course, a crucial electoral college swing state where Vice President Kamala Harris began her day campaigning with Republican Liz Cheney.
In this election, and especially here in Pennsylvania, we have the opportunity to tell the whole world who we are. And we have the chance to say, you know, we're going to reject cruelty. We're going to reject the kind of vile vitriol that we've seen from Donald Trump. We're going to reject the misogyny that we've seen from Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. And we have the chance in this race to elect somebody who you know is going to defend the rule of law. You know Vice President Harris is going to defend our Constitution. We have the chance to remind people that we are a good country. We are a good and honorable people. We are a great nation. And in this race, we have the opportunity to vote for and support somebody you can count on. We're not always going to agree, but I know Vice President Harris will always do what she believes is right for this country. She has a sincere heart, and that's why I'm honored to be here and supporting her in this race.
That discussion was moderated by our first guest tonight, Sarah Longwell. The latest Washington Post poll shows Kamala Harris at 49 in Pennsylvania to Donald Trump's 47. The same poll shows Kamala Harris at 49 in Michigan and Donald Trump at 47 there. Michigan was the next stop today on the campaign trail for Kamala Harris and Liz Cheney.
You know, everybody I talk to says, you know, I have to turn off the news. I can't read anything. I'm meditating. I'm doing yoga. I'm so anxious. I just don't even know. I'm eating gummies, all kinds of things, you know. What are you doing? What are you doing?
Not eating gummies.
Okay, we got that clear. But how do you, how do you handle this, the anxiety, the stress, the turmoil? Everybody's freaked out. I talked to the gentleman up there. He's like, I'm so scared. A woman's like, I'm so anxious. I can't sleep. Do you sleep?
You know, I wake up in the middle of the night usually these days, so to be honest with you, but I work out every morning. I think that's really important to just kind of, you know, mind, body, and spirit. But let me just say this.
No, say more about that.
But I will. I work out. I try to eat well. You know, I love my family, and I make sure that I talk to the kids and my husband every day. Doug and I have been kind of, traveling. We're trying to cover a lot of ground, so we're not with each other every day these days. But my family grounds me in every way. But if I can just speak to what people are feeling. We cannot despair. We cannot despair. You know, the nature of a democracy is such that I think there's a duality. On the one hand, there's an incredible strength when our democracy is intact. An incredible strength in what it does to protect the freedoms and rights of its people. Oh, there's great strength in that. And it is very fragile. It is only as strong as our willingness to fight for it. And so that's the moment we're in. And I say do not despair, because in a democracy, as long as we can keep it in our democracy, the people, every individual has the power to make a decision about what this will be. And so let's not feel powerless. Let's not let and I get it, overwhelming nature of this all make us feel powerless, because then we have been defeated. And that's not our character as the American people. We are not one to be defeated. We rise to a moment, and we stand on broad shoulders of people who have fought this fight before for our country. And in many ways, let us look at the challenge then that we are being presented and not be overwhelmed by it. The baton is now in our hands to fight for, not against, but for this country we love. That's what we have the power to do. So let's own that. Dare I say, be joyful in what we will do in the process of owning that, which is knowing that we can and will build community and coalitions and remind people that we're all in this together. Let's not let the overwhelming nature of this strip us of our strength. That's how I feel about this. That's how I feel about this.
In Wisconsin, the Washington Post poll shows Kamala Harris at 50 and Donald Trump at 47. Wisconsin was the final stop on the campaign trail for Kamala Harris and Liz Cheney tonight.
And again, most recently, the report is that the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a decorated general, said of Donald Trump that he is fascist to the core. These are the people who know him best, people who worked with him. And so, yes, we can talk about that moment on stage of the music and all that, but I think it's very important that we acknowledge, and I've said publicly, Donald Trump is an unserious man. And the consequences of him ever being president of the United States again are brutally serious.
America's safety and security depends upon America leading, and it depends upon allies. Yeah. And when you have someone who is erratic and chaotic and unstable, that puts all of us at risk. I tell people often, you know, I spend a lot of time working on national security issues, and when people that I know in the Republican Party tell me they might be considering voting for Trump from a national security perspective, I ask them, go look at his national security policies. Please go look at them, because what he's proposing in terms of withdrawing from NATO, welcoming Vladimir Putin to attack our NATO allies, praising, he praises Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, and President Xi of China, and Putin of Russia. And if you listen to him, he doesn't just praise those people generally. He praises them for their cruelty, yep, for their tyranny. Yep. That's not who we are as a nation. It's not who we are. And the world needs us to be better, and our own security and our own freedom requires that we have a president who understands America has to lead, and that our strength comes both from our greatness and also from our goodness. And that's Vice President Harris.
The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget released a report today saying that Donald Trump's tax proposals and budget proposals would leave Social Security facing insolvency in just 6 years. Vice President Harris responded to that news in Michigan.
The other issue that has come up recently has been the issue of what we are seeing again about Donald Trump just being frankly hostile to the whole notion and importance of Social Security. There are many seniors in our country that Social Security is their only form of income. And now an independent agency has reviewed Donald Trump's theory about Social Security and his policies and has indicated that his policy would actually render the Social Security fund empty, essentially, in 6 years. Again, if you look at it from minimum wage to Social Security, Donald Trump clearly does not understand the needs of working people.
Donald Trump is, of course, running for president as a way of staying out of jail. He is facing sentencing next month in New York City for convictions he's already been found guilty of this year in a courtroom in New York. A panel of former Trump voters in Nevada, moderated by our first guest tonight, seems to have figured out what the Trump campaign is all about.
I think he's running for himself to keep himself out of jail. He's a convicted felon. I don't trust him. I don't believe he respects the Constitution. And he will come in and he will change as much as he can. And I worry will become a dictatorship in the United States.
Mm-hmm. She snagged that dictatorship word from me right before I was going to use it. And, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if he tries to pass a thing where he can stay president for the rest of his life.
Donald Trump has spent more time publicly discussing his penis and the penises of other men he admires than any other presidential candidate in history. The total amount of time every other presidential candidate in history has spent on either one of those subjects is zero. The first time he ran for president, Donald Trump repeatedly referred to, in his vocabulary-challenged way, his penis, after Marco Rubio said this.
He's always calling me Little Marco. And I'll admit, the guy, he's taller than me. He's like 6'2", which is why I don't understand why his hands are the size of someone who's 5'2". Have you seen his hands? They're like this. And you know what they say about men with small hands? You can't trust them.
I have to say this. He hit my hands. Nobody has ever hit my hands. I've never heard of this one. Look at those hands. Are they small hands? And he referred to my hands. If they're small, something else must be small. I guarantee you there's no problem. I guarantee it.
Yesterday, Donald Trump talked about one of the most famous golfers who ever lived, who Donald Trump said adoringly was all man.
Arnold Palmer was all man, and I say that in all due respect to women, and I love women. But this guy, this is a guy that was all man. This man was strong and tough, and I refuse to say it, but when he took showers with the other pros, they came out of there, they said, oh my God. That's unbelievable. I had to say it. I had to say it. We have women that are highly sophisticated here, but they used to look at Arnold as a bad, but he was really something special. Arnold was something special.
He means it. He had to say it. He had to talk about Arnold Palmer's penis. Arnold Palmer died 6 weeks before the 2016 presidential election. His daughter, Peg, said, quote, he was appalled by Trump's lack of civility and what he began to see as Trump's lack of character. Our next guest began what became a day of public discussions for Kamala Harris and Liz Cheney with this question.
I've got to start with the thing that brings us here today, because I've got to say it is unusual for somebody who is as high up in the Republican leadership as Liz Cheney was to be out here campaigning with the Democratic nominee for president. And so maybe why don't both of you tell us, but you start. You've actually marshaled unprecedented support from Republicans in this election. Why do you think that is?
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for being here and for your work. And the Congresswoman, thank you. I have said before, and it must be repeated each time, there are moments in the history of our country which challenge us, each of us, to really
decide, do we stand for those things that we talk about, including a particular country over party? And you have been extraordinarily courageous in the way that you have done that, and I thank you for that.
Leading off our discussion tonight is Sarah Longwell, the founder of Republican Voters Against Trump. She moderated today's event near Philadelphia with Vice President Harris and Liz Cheney. Sarah, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And thank you for continuing, in your first question at least, to marvel at what we're seeing, to marvel at seeing Republican Liz Cheney campaigning for a Democrat for president. I still haven't gotten used to it, and it is, as the vice president said, one of those noble choices of the country over party.
You know, it is strangely still kind of underappreciated how many Republicans are out on Donald Trump. I mean, the vice president pointed this out, but it was worth restating. Donald Trump's own vice president isn't endorsing him. So many of the people who worked in his cabinet aren't endorsing him. And then you've got the Republicans that are out there. You know, there are hundreds of Republicans that worked in national security who have signed letters endorsing Kamala Harris. You've got former senators like Jeff Flake. I was just on the road doing a Bulwark Live show, and former Republican Congressman Charlie Dent from Pennsylvania, he was there. He had just early voted for Kamala Harris. And you've got Liz Cheney willing to actively be out on the stump, talking to undecided voters, spending all day flying around the country, making the case for why she believes that Kamala Harris is the right person to vote for. And what I appreciated about the conversation, because this is where I sort of struggle all the time, and I kind of sometimes want to shake people, is that they talked about the stakes. You know, I just think so often we're talking about the state of the race, and we're sort of caught up in the day-to-day news cycles of, yeah, Donald Trump worked at McDonald's, and then Kamala Harris went here, but the stakes are the reason that they're on the stage together. The stakes are the reason that I wake up every day and try to figure out how we persuade more, you know, right-leaning independents and soft GOP voters to vote for Kamala Harris, because there is not a Republican candidate in this race that reflects anything resembling traditional Republican values. Donald Trump doesn't care about limited government, free markets, and American leadership in the world. And so if you want a responsible grown-up in the White House, somebody you trust to have their finger on the button, to make good judgments, to be decent to Americans, to not actively divide us, there really is only one choice, and it is not a hard one.
Sarah, what is your assessment of how this is going? So this is the campaign very publicly trying to reach out to those Republican voters who you know are available, who you know can maybe be persuaded between now and Election Day. How do you think that persuasion of the potential pull from Republican voters is going now?
I actually think it's going really well. I think there's a lot of ways in which she is making up for some of the slide that you're seeing with young men, maybe young Hispanic or Black men. But what she's doing is she's actually really holding her own in sort of a counterintuitive way with older white voters. And one of the things that I try to remind people of all the time is that now that Donald Trump's been with us for the last 10 years, young Republicans, people who are kind of coming into the party, they're coming for Donald Trump. They don't really understand, you know, what's the deal with Nikki Haley? What's the deal with Mitt Romney? They don't recognize or know anything about that party. But people who are 60 years old who are Republicans, you know, they came to the Republican Party because of Ronald Reagan. And so Donald Trump's MAGA movement resembles nothing of the Republican Party they joined. And so those tend to be these right-leaning independents that find themselves unable to vote for Donald Trump, but because they've been tribally Republican for so long, they're trying to figure out how to get there on Kamala Harris. And the fact that she goes out and pitches to them aggressively, the fact that she has moved to the center on some of her policy issues, the fact that she has welcomed Liz Cheney, in fact, Dick Cheney's endorsement, I think she's been very intentional about saying, hey, this is a big tent coalition. Come on in. And look, when I look through the crosstabs on some of these major national polls, the good ones, you know, I was just looking at the New York Times Siena poll in Pennsylvania. She's pulling 11% of self-identified Republicans in that poll. And so those people definitely vote. And if she's able to move margins like that, I think that they could be decisive, just as they were decisive in 2020 and in 2022. Those marginal Republican voters, they are the margin makers.
Sarah Longwell, thank you very much for leading off our discussions tonight.
Thanks for having me.
And coming up tonight, the Kamala Harris and Liz Cheney campaign tour ended in Wisconsin. Wisconsin Democratic Party Chairman Ben Wickler will join us next.
Remember what we just most recently, what was reported. During the height of COVID, Americans were dying by the hundreds a day. Nobody could get their hands on COVID tests. You remember what that was. During that time, he secretly sent COVID tests to Vladimir Putin for his personal use. On the issue of Ukraine, he says, oh, well, I'd solve that in a day. Well, I don't think we as Americans think that the President of the United States should solve an issue like that through surrender. And understand that's what would happen. Understand that's what would happen.
Joining our discussion now is Ben Wickler. He is the chair of the Democratic Party in Wisconsin. Ben, once again, the campaign came to Wisconsin today. Charlie Sykes, Wisconsin native, moderating that discussion. How did it play in Wisconsin?
I think this was a home run in Wisconsin. This spoke to conservative voters who know in their heart that Trump is the wrong person for this moment. You know, they were in Waukesha County, which Trump won by 20 points. This was in the town of Brookfield, which Trump won by 8.5 points. But there are a ton of folks in red areas in Wisconsin who watched what happened on January 6th, who watched what happened when Dobbs came in and overturned Roe versus Wade, and who know that they cannot vote for Trump again. So tonight, Kamala Harris reached out and said, you can vote for me. And she was joined by Republicans who said the same thing. The water is fine. This is the moment to put country over party. It's a message that Wisconsinites need to hear. And tonight they heard it.
She came into Wisconsin today, according to the Washington Post poll, 3 points ahead of Donald Trump. This campaign stop is targeted toward Republicans. Is that the spot to target at this point for her?
Well, the way you win Wisconsin is by doing everything, everywhere, all at once. We're treating this race like it's tied. Trump was wildly underestimated in polls in 2016 and 2020. Maybe that's the direction of polling error this year. Maybe it's the other way. But either way, we're going to treat this like it's in the margin of effort, not the margin of error. And for us, that means reaching out to persuadable and undecided voters, cynical voters who don't like both parties, committed conservatives who put country over party, and progressives and folks who might disagree with Kamala Harris, from another direction, and saying, let's at least agree to have a democracy in 2025 instead of having Project 2025. That's what folks who go to wisdoms.org and chip in and volunteer are helping ensure, that we can actually be the United States of America next year and build on the enormous work that has to be done to make an economy that works for everybody and a country that respects and honors everybody.
Ben, and I'm asking this for the people in 40 states out there who never have this experience. What is it like, and how important is it, I guess is what I mean, for Wisconsin voters, for Kamala Harris to actually come to the state? And I'm asking for all the states that don't matter in the Electoral College where the candidates never come.
Sometimes after an election, you find out that someone who was kind of paying attention, they just never voted. If someone had asked for their vote, they would have shown up. They would have taken that final step and cast a ballot. And when Harris comes to a battleground state, when Walz and Obama come to Wisconsin tomorrow and ask people to early voting starts on October 22nd, that means something. There's going to be some voter who's paying attention and who's saying, okay, this person is here. My vote actually matters. This could decide the outcome. I'm going to go and vote my beliefs. It matters to show up. We're organizing in every county in Wisconsin. We knocked on hundreds of thousands of doors across Wisconsin this week with thousands of volunteers. Every one of those conversations matters, because hearing directly from someone that you matter, that your voice is actually going to count, it can make all the difference. We're a high turnout state and a low margin of victory state. And getting those final 10, 20,000 votes, it could tip the state that tips the country.
Ben Wickler, who will be falling asleep during Thanksgiving dinner because he still will not be recovered from the sleep deprivation he's suffering right now tonight. Ben, thank you very much for always finding a way to fit us in.
Thanks so much, Lawrence.
Thank you. And coming up, Democrat Colin Allred is running strong in Texas in his campaign against Republican Senator Cruz. Senate Democrats now believe Colin Allred can flip the Senate Texas seat to the Democrats. Colin Allred, as Rachel promised you, will join us next. Today is the first day of early in-person voting in Texas, where voters have a chance to make history by voting for the first winning Democratic candidate for Senate in Texas since 1988, when Lloyd Bentsen won his reelection campaign. Senate Democrats now have high hopes of picking up a Senate seat in Texas with our next guest, Congressman Colin Allred, running against Republican Senator Rafael Edward Cruz. Here's what Colin Allred had to say after casting his vote today.
It's not really about that to me. This is a different question, which is who's better to serve us for the next 6 years, Ted Cruz or me? We've seen for 12 years how Senator Cruz has served, how he went to Cancun when we needed him most, how he tried to overturn an American presidential election, how he's singularly responsible for this abortion ban here in Texas. I've been the most bipartisan Texan in Congress. I'm the exact opposite. And so while we have a lot of history building up to this is a singular choice for Texans that's a little bit different from what we've had in the past.
And here is some of what Colin Allred had to say in the Senate candidates debate last week.
You can't be for the mob on January 6th and for the officers. You can't. And it's not funny because you're a threat to democracy. I texted my wife, Allie, who was 7 months pregnant with our son, Cameron, and at home with our son, Jordan, who wasn't yet 2. Whatever happens, I love you. And I took off my suit jacket and I was prepared to defend the House floor from the mob. At the same time, after he'd gone around the country lying about the election, after he'd been the architect of the attempt to overthrow that election, when that mob came, Senator Cruz was hiding in a supply closet. You're not actually there when people need you, like when the lights went out, when 30 million Texans were relying on a senator to spring into action. He went to Cancun. That's who he is. If you give me the chance to be your United States Senator, I'll never abandon you. Senator Cruz just called himself pro-life. You're not. You're not pro-life. It's not pro-life to deny women care so long that they can't have children anymore. It's not pro-life to force a victim of rape to carry their rapist's baby. It's not pro-life that our maternal mortality rate has skyrocketed up by 56%. That's not pro-life, Senator. So to every Texas woman at home and to every Texas family watching this, understand that when Ted Cruz says he's pro-life, he doesn't mean yours.
Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Colin Allred. He's the Democratic candidate for Senate in Texas. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. That's very, very powerful stuff from that debate. And I just want to reemphasize the very first part of it that we showed, which was you making the point that you can't be for the mob on January 6th and for the officers. And Ted Cruz laughs at that. And the way you grabbed him on that, saying it's not funny, it's because it's a threat to democracy. That clearly, that part about it's not funny and grabbing at that smile of his was obviously something that happened in the moment.
Yeah, it was. Well, thanks for having me on, Lawrence. And, listen, there was nothing funny about it. And, I think he was uncomfortable because I think he knew that I was calling him out on his singular responsibility for being the architect of the attempt to overthrow an American presidential election. And that he knew that in many ways, this election is his accountability. He knows that. And so this is what we have to do here in Texas, is that we have a lot of things to hold Ted Cruz accountable for going to Cancun when we needed him most, for being somebody who never is a part of bipartisan legislation that helps our state, but also for being uniquely damaging to our democracy. And I'm glad I had a chance to call him out in front of 30 million Texans. In the closing now 14 days of campaigning, is there a single issue in what we just heard from you in that debate? Is there a single issue that you will be stressing more than any other? Well, Lawrence, I mean, as you know, and we've talked about this over the course of this campaign, this abortion ban in Texas has been horrific. And there have been so many brave Texas women and Texas families who've come forward and told their stories, Amanda Zarowski and Kate Cox and Lauren Miller and Dr. Austin Dennard and Taylor Edwards, and I could keep going because there are so many stories and they are so incredibly powerful. And we're going to continue to hold Ted Cruz accountable for being responsible for this abortion ban here. But also, as I felt in that debate, and I've been feeling for some time, Ted Cruz is simply too small for Texas. You know, everything's bigger in Texas, and he's too small for our state. His vision for us is too small. And that's why we're going to turn the page. But we need folks' help, and I hope folks will go to ColinAllred.com and get involved.
You know, I was just reading the maternal mortality statistics in Texas last week, actually, since Roe versus Wade was overturned. And it is just stunning what has happened there. Rachel made the point in the previous hour that all of the major newspapers in Texas are supporting you. They're against Senator Cruz. That's right. Is the Texas news media covering what has happened in that state after Dobbs in a way that is very clear to voters?
They really are. And, you know, it's the Houston Chronicle that was reporting on that 26,000 Texas women have been forced to give birth to their rapist child. It's these individual stories that have gotten the traction and gotten the coverage, and also because these incredibly strong women came forward and also filed a lawsuit or lawsuits to challenge these laws, that it's put it in front of people. And, you know, Lawrence, over the course of this campaign, I've come in front of a lot of Texans who don't realize how extreme this ban is. You know, they think that there is an exception for rape or incest. No, there's not. They think there's an exception for the health of the mother. It's not for the health of the mother. It's for the life of the mother, which is an incredibly narrow exception. And who is making that determination? It's lawyers, not doctors. And this is outrageous. You know, 20% of OBGYNs in Texas are considering leaving the state. 13% are considering retiring early. And more of the residents who are here are planning on not practicing here to be OBGYNs. We're going to have a huge shortage of folks to actually serve as OBGYNs in our state. We're at the beginning of feeling the impacts of this extreme ban. And we have to reverse it now. And by beating Ted Cruz, we're going to make Roe v. Wade the law of the land again. We'll restore freedom to Texas women.
Congressman Colin Allred on the verge of possibly making political history in Texas. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you. If you're thinking of voting for Jill Stein, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has something important to tell you about Jill Stein. And so did Jill Stein's children. That's next. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has had enough of Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate for president.
All you do is show up once every 4 years to speak to people who are justifiably pissed off, but you're just showing up once every 4 years to do that. You're not serious. You're not, to me, it does not read as authentic. It reads as predatory.
Donald Trump became president of the United States thanks to the Electoral College and Jill Stein. The votes that Jill Stein took from Hillary Clinton in key Electoral College states were enough to help Donald Trump win Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Donald Trump is very grateful to Jill Stein. He says that he likes Jill Stein because she takes 100% of her votes from the Democratic candidate for president. And that's why the Harris for President campaign is now running this ad.
Jill Stein, Green Party candidate for president. So why are Trump's close allies helping her? Stein was key to Trump's 2016 wins in battleground states. She's not sorry she helped Trump win. That's why a vote for Stein is really a vote for Trump.
Jill Stein, I like her very much. You know why? She takes 100% from them.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
And the Democratic Party is running this ad about Jill Stein.
You can tell a lot about a person by the company they keep. Like Jill Stein. Stein isn't sorry about swinging the 2016 election to Trump. And now she's being helped by MAGA allies and Trump's former lawyer. Longtime Klan leader David Duke endorsed her. And like Trump, she's cozied up to Vladimir Putin. Jill Stein, look at her friends, because a vote for Stein is a vote for Trump.
These are the very first ads that a Democratic presidential candidate and the Democratic Party have ever targeted at a third-party candidate. For Kamala Harris to win, Jill Stein has to be stopped. And the only people who can stop her now are voters. Her family has already tried. When she told us she was going to run again back in October 2023, we asked her not to, said one of her adult sons in an interview with the New York Times, asking not to be identified by name to avoid any personal or professional repercussions from associating with her. Jill Stein's children want no public association with their mother. What would it take for you to turn against your 74-year-old mother if she were running for office? That same son of Jill Stein told the New York Times, for her political activities, she does not have the support of the family. But Jill Stein does have the support of Donald Trump, who likes her and publicly supports her. Jill Stein does have the support of Vladimir Putin, and Jill Stein does have the support of some voters who consider Kamala Harris the lesser of two evils on the issue that they care about most, the treatment of Palestinians trying to survive in Gaza. None of those people have probably had the chance to read Bob Woodward's new book, which details how Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been doing everything they possibly can every day to get a ceasefire and to get humanitarian supplies to people in Gaza over the objections of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who at first refused to allow even an ounce of humanitarian aid into Gaza. Those were Netanyahu's words to Joe Biden, as quoted in Bob Woodward's book, not a drop, not an ounce. Joe Biden fought through that resistance and got humanitarian supplies shipped to Gaza. And despite trying every day, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have not been able to get Israel and Hamas to agree to a ceasefire. If Donald Trump is president again, Bibi Netanyahu will decide exactly how much humanitarian assistance gets to Gaza, and Donald Trump won't care. If it's not a drop, not an ounce, Donald Trump will support that choice. Donald Trump will support anything that Bibi Netanyahu wants to do in Gaza or anywhere. Donald Trump is clearly the worst possible winner of this presidential election for anyone who cares about the safety and future of the Palestinian people. Donald Trump has never pressured the Israeli government to move toward establishing a Palestinian state. And so Kamala Harris is not the lesser of two evils on the issue of the future of the Palestinian people in a Palestinian state. Kamala Harris is good on that issue, but she is not perfect, not even close to perfect for Jill Stein voters. Jill Stein voters are allowing the perfect to be the enemy of the good. Jill Stein is perfect on the issue that they care about, and Jill Stein is never going to be elected to any office in the United States of America. Never. She will never matter. It's easy to be perfect on difficult issues when you're not trying to win more than 1% of the vote. Jill Stein's running mate, Butch Ware, says Kamala Harris is, in his words, quote, the black face of white supremacy. Jill Stein's running mate calls Barack Obama, quote, a house Negro. Those are the words of Jill Stein's running mate. Jill Stein's running mate says nothing about Donald Trump. Jill Stein says nothing about Donald Trump. They are not running against Donald Trump. They are running against Kamala Harris, and they are running for Donald Trump. The New York Times interviewed Bob McMurray, a campaign volunteer for Jill Stein in Michigan, who said that he voted for Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden in the last two elections, but this time he's voting for Jill Stein, quote, even as he surmised that Donald Trump would be worse for Gaza. I've been voting my entire life for the lesser of two evils, he said. I'm tired of it. I understand that feeling, Bob. I've voted for third-party candidates many times before the 21st century, but I've never voted in a state where my presidential vote matters. Massachusetts, then New York, and now California. Bob, my vote isn't going to matter in this year's election because we already know who's going to win in California. Your vote in Michigan matters much more than any voter in California or New York or Massachusetts or 35 other states. Bob, you as a Michigan voter have been entrusted by the founding fathers as one of the American voters who actually gets to choose the winner of the Electoral College, and you're tired. And because you're tired, you're not going to vote for Kamala Harris.
They asked a question during the debate about housing policy, and their big housing policy is mass deportations. Kamala Harris's answer is we're going to help you with your down payment, and we're going to take on the Wall Street actors who are outbidding everybody in for a house.
A vote for Jill Stein is a vote for Donald Trump. A vote for Jill Stein is a vote for mass deportations. If Donald Trump becomes president and Jill Stein voters are watching millions of people deported from this country, if they are watching their friends being deported from this country, their friends will know that Jill Stein voters are to blame for what Donald Trump is doing to them. They will know that it is happening thanks to Jill Stein. That's tonight's last word.